Every child deserves a champion, an adult who'll never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best they can possibly be. Rita Pierson. For returning guests, welcome back to the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning podcast for episode 225 with a case study from someone I've mentioned before on the podcast, Ellie Mercado from Ossining Union Free School District in New York, who you'll see is a strong force with a goal to support all students with the most comprehensive SEL plans that I've ever seen. I'll be sure to link her plans and resources in the show notes for you to access and use as you would like, since her goal is to help all of us move students forward with as much support as possible. This interview takes a look at SEL with an equity lens, with clear examples of how to begin, what to do, and what SEL looks like in her district. I do love hearing how people around the globe are implementing the ideas we share with you on the podcast. It really does help me with new ideas and motivation. And Ellie Mercado, who's an assistant principal in Ossining, New York, let me know that she was inspired by what she was learning to support her students and staff. Little did I know just how much she would inspire me with her story and thorough SEL plans that I think everyone in education could benefit from. You'll see in this interview that I made more connections with her story that I think is important to share with everyone here, because just one piece of information or motivation can have a huge ripple effect on the world. Before we meet Elizabeth, I just want to tell you a bit about her. She's an immigrant student who came at 12 years old from the Dominican Republic without speaking English to a poor neighborhood in the South Bronx, living in a 1,500 square feet apartment with 8 children, ages 12 and younger, and 4 adults, and experienced firsthand what it is to have challenges growing up outside of school and in school. This experience gave her an in-depth understanding of the impact of how our cultural, racial, ethnic, linguistic, and economic backgrounds can impact our learning. This is why she's passionate about being an educator and wants to create the best learning environments for her staff and students in the Ossining community, where many of them come from a similar background. She believes that all students can be successful. She's a middle school and early childhood assistant principal for the last 7 years, and 1 year as an elementary early childhood assistant principal, whose goal is to provide her students with a safe, trusting, and nurturing learning environment where they feel included, respected, supported, recognizing that every student and staff member has unique strengths. She believes it's important to be intentional about all they do, since everything makes a difference. The images on the walls that they see, the pictures in their books they read, the holidays that are recognized, accepting and celebrating all, promoting student agency, voice, and choice is all critical so students feel that they belong. I hope that Elizabeth's story inspires you, and you'll see it deeply moved me, whether you're working in a school or in some other capacity, to think of where to begin when looking at SEL through an equity lens. Let's meet Elizabeth, or Ellie Mercado. Welcome, Ellie. It's incredible to meet you finally after all the support that you've sent our way with our podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
I am delighted to be here and for you to give me this opportunity to share my story and my experience and see how I can help other educators all over the United States, all over the world.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've got to say, I'm so grateful that you reached out to us and shared your SEL implementation story with us. So I've never actually seen someone implementing SEL so comprehensively. And I've been doing this work for quite some time. And when I came across your presentation as to how you're implementing at Ossining in New York, I just thought I've got to have you on and share, because you can break it down for everyone who looks at it and says, I don't know where to begin, right? Have you heard that a lot?
Yes, I have heard that a lot because it is a lot of work and there's so many areas that we can touch. But I always tell people that even if we can just make one little change or one little action is a way of moving us forward. And you know a little bit of my story, and one person really changed the trajectory of my life today, where I am today as a leader in education.
Well, that's really when I listened to your story and it caught my eye. It was why I wanted you to share. And I've really got a leverage off of the emotions that I felt watching your presentation and hearing your story, because you talk about implementing SEL with an equity lens. And your story shows exactly why SEL skills are so important in our schools and why we've got to transition these skills into the workplace. So can you begin with your why? And it's pretty powerful, why you're so passionate about implementing SEL with this equity lens, and share your story with all of us. It's so important on so many different levels for others to hear this.
Sure, absolutely. The why. Why I came to this country when I was a teenager, and I came in, facing all the and I had to endure the trauma that a lot of our students are facing today, from being an immigrant, coming in extreme poverty, homeless. We were four. My mom had four kids. I was the oldest, and then we moved in with another family. So there was 8 of us and 4 adults, 8 kids and 4 adults. Me being the oldest one, of all the kids. So facing extreme poverty and being an immigrant, not having a home, living, the separation from my parent. My father didn't get a visa, so it was just the 4 kids and me coming into living with somebody else. The language barrier, not knowing the language, and being in an unsafe environment in the South Bronx where violence, drugs, and abuse and everything you don't want your child to be facing, I had to face. The cultural shock just coming into middle school and trying to hug and kiss my teacher and realizing that's what I did there. I can't do that here, and feeling rejected about it. The fear and the anxiety, my mom coming to this country, and she was so unemotionally unavailable because she was trying to survive and not. She valued education, but she had to try to get we need to get housing, we need to get food stamps, we need to get medical. So I was staying with her to go to those appointments and to take care of all those things, and that fear and anxiety, and also one of the things I share, I like to point out that the importance of educating our teachers about English language learners. When I came to this country, in one of my English classes, this teacher wanted me to write a poem, and I worked really hard when I was a hardworking student in my country. So they asked me to write a poem in similes and metaphors, and I'm like, okay, first of all, look at home in the dictionary, what is the simile, what is the metaphor? Wrote it in Spanish and translated it into English, then read it and trying to make it perfect, just to come the next day all by myself, while I didn't know they were going to call me and say to read it in front of the class, because I was able to understand more, but my accent, I was too shy, and I didn't speak in public. So making me get up and going to the front, I was obedient. I just did it. And not being able to, when I was trying to read it, she got behind my back trying to make me pronounce every single word, and because they couldn't understand my accent. And the more I said it, the more she said again, this is how you say it. Say it again. And I just kept repeating and repeating, and all the kids laughing, and me just drowning, I just can't talk without an accent. And just a feeling of humiliation, and the feeling of why did my parents want to do this? I know they say it's a better education here and a good life, but I don't want to be humiliated. And then after that, not wanting to speak at all. I didn't, just trying to do my best and all of that. Just because she didn't know that we go through the silent period, and the accent is something that is still with me up to today. And being in a high school that was really unsafe, that at lunchtime, I didn't have anybody to talk to, and boys touching people inappropriately, and and all of that. Those are just some of the things that I had to go through, and it was so challenging and hard and fearful that it was tough. It was hard. I'm grateful for, I did have a few things in my journey that were helpful, and was one of my English language learners teachers. She when I went through high school, automatically they put me in the remedial courses. Back then it was RCT versus Regents Diploma. And she discovered in me, Elizabeth is my real name, but Ellie can do better. She can handle the math classes. She can handle it. And they were like, no, she only has, a few years in this country. She can't do that. And until she fought for me, and I was able to be placed in Regents courses and take AP Math and AP Spanish and be in rigorous classes, because she fought for me. And the Spanish teacher, when I was uncomfortable going into lunch and recess because I was being bullish, I asked, can I just stay in your classroom? Because I was just so fearful. And it was a choice of, I just skip school and cut and leave, or I just ask somebody where I could just stay safely here until I go to my next class. So I wanted to graduate. My mom had the dream of us going. I was the first one to graduate college. So for us going through all of that for a good education, I could not just not go to school. I had like that guilt feeling of also being the oldest one, wanting to do the right thing, but also struggling, right? So she said, fine. So every day, at lunchtime, I just stay in the back of her Spanish class doing my homework and just go to the next class, because I was just so fearful of bullying and everything, all the unsafe things that were happening there. So, just realizing that made me, think really hardly about how important social emotional learning through an equity lens, and having our teachers and educators and people know where our kids are coming from and what they have to go through and what we can do to support them. So, there are less kids like me don't have to go through that. That's my purpose. If I can share my story and share some ideas of what I think, not research-based, and also from my experience, like having just that one person that I trusted and believed in me and fought for me, because I didn't have a voice and I didn't know better, but she knew that I was capable of, and with her help, I was able to get a full scholarship for my undergrad and graduate school. And, today I'm a leader in education. So that's why my passion, that's what it comes from. And if I can do anything to help anybody, help at least one child, I will be, that will be my, I guess my calling, I did my job basically.
Wow, there's so much in your story that hit me to the heart. I worked with Pierson Longman selling ESL programs for 6 years to the schools. That was where my husband and I met. He was an English language learner student himself. And so he did really well going into the classrooms. And when I was talking to teachers across the US, I never once came from the point of view that you just shared, how painful it is for the students. I would just come like, here's a book for your students coming, have a look at it. But when I think about everything you just said, not fitting in, the teachers really didn't know how to help you fit in either. All that you were going through at home with trying to support your mom and translate, and leaving class to translate for your mom at home. There was so much more to what I wish I knew when I was representing ESL books in our schools. So your story is so important. I just wish I heard it back when I was working with ESL teachers, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
So I also have both my girls in a dual language Spanish program in Arizona. So they spend half their day learning Spanish. And I couldn't stop thinking about how powerful it would be to have a fluent Spanish speaker available for my girls, or just thinking about what your experience why it wasn't embraced that you had this talent of being able to speak Spanish. So I was just thinking, I wish you had a different experience, although your experience got you to where you are. But I wish that someone had recognized the talent that you had and that it was an easier path for you. I think that's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, and in my experience, I actually have helped us support some of the things we have in our system in our school currently, in the sense we do have a dual language program, and we not only pair up like students where like in the dual language program we have English speaking students like your daughters and Spanish speaking dominants. Like, let's say if I was in that program, which I wasn't, I will be part of it, and they will pair us up so I can be helpful to, you know, a student like your daughter, and your daughter can be helpful to me with the English and that part of it. So that's one of the buddy systems that we do. And we also have a buddy system with students when a newcomer comes in, and this is part of some of the things that we have created. They will pair me up with somebody that has been here maybe 2 years ahead of me, usually from the same culture, because that person basically can, and you know, has lunch and recess with me, usually from the same class. That way that person can support me, guide me through, navigate the system, the school, where to go and what to do. But at the same time, that person has to fresh in their mind how it feels to be just like a newcomer. So we have those two, those cohorts of those things in place to make sure we are they're supporting one another and using my language as an asset, not as a deficit, because that's another I mean, challenge that I noticed. Why are we seeing another language as English language learned as a deficit instead of an asset, right?
Yes,
And
that's what I saw.
yeah, so we want to change that. And I feel that having that buddy system with an English speaking and a Spanish speaking to support, and also a newcomer with somebody that is a little bit further ahead, that they know how I feel, and at the same time they have the knowledge of the system to navigate and help me go through that. I think that's really important. That way you don't feel alone and isolated, and you have someone that understands you.
Oh, for sure. And then, so you had this experience and you went all the way through. And where are you now in Ossining? You're a principal, is that right?
Right now, I am like an assistant principal at an early childhood. I worked in the middle school for 6 years. And I'm actually leading a summer program in July, and I'm the summer school principal for my K through 5th program. And I did have an undergraduate of mathematics and elementary education, and also and from Columbia University, bicultural bilingual master's degree, and a degree in district and school administration. So right now I'm leading this school, but I also am part of a lot of the social emotional learning, cultural of care committees and long-term plan that our district is doing, to not only to change, because a lot of people think it's just like the self-care or just introducing the kids out of the competencies, self-awareness, relationship skill, all of that is important. But a lot of the times we need to, change the things in the system and create a system that provides that structure for that to happen, right? And that's some of the things that I'm going to be, we're probably going to be discussing the recommendations of some of the things that we can do to make that happen. And, one of the things, like in the past, we, teach, especially in early childhood, like it's normal for them to be more nurturing and welcoming. What is your name? Where you come from? That's all part of the curriculum. But right now, the system has changed, where right now we have actually embedded in our schedule community circle time, where that time in the elementary schools, they do circle time, or they do SEL work, or they do breathing or calm classroom, some learning that has to do to support our student with the social emotional learning skills aligned to the New York State standards that are benchmark. And for the middle and high school, we have actually embedded advisory groups, which are like smaller groups that educators meet, and they get to know those kids really, really well. And they become like the mentors and guiding them through the system. And something else that we have put into place is like having cohorts. Like, let's say in middle school, you have a 6th grade AP, a 6th grade social worker, and a 6th grade counselor. And when you come into 6th grade, and definitely there's always like either Spanish speaking or two or three, or the three of them that can communicate with the child. They go with you from 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So that way that we get to know the families and the child really, really well, instead of every year having like a new AP or a new social worker or a new guidance counselor, because learning deep connections and deep relationships and building those relationships takes time and is so critical to this work.
Definitely. Can you kind of bring us back to when it all began? Because I watched SEL come into our schools in the US in waves, and I followed Linda Dusenberry from Castle, her Collaborating States initiative from the very beginning, when there were only 8 states that had SEL initiatives. And I remember watching her webinars thinking, I don't know why I'm watching this, but I'm taking notes to see which states were implementing. And so someone with the passion that you have, do you remember when it was beginning, and how did you implement such a comprehensive program to where you are now? How did you go through the steps?
I feel that our district has always valued social emotional learning and building relationships, as I said to you, but also like, for example, like our population has changed, and that's where equity lens come in. Like, for example, I have some data. In 2008, we had 40% of our students were white, while 56% were Latinx or Blacks. And this now in 2022, in February, we only have 90% whites, and while 75% of our students are Latinx or Blacks, and 61% receive free and reduced lunch. So in addition to the change of population, with all the politics and racial changes and things that are happening in the world, the pandemic, and also, and you see, we know how depression, mental health, all these things are happening. We realize we need to do more, and we need to make a change. And we started, a lot of the times we have so many initiatives and this curriculum and this and that and this, and we spread ourselves so thin that we don't focus on anything. And we did like a big deep, we had someone like interview all the teachers and all the staff, and realizing what was important and what they wanted to be 3 main focus. And after all, like a couple of years of that research done, we came up with 3 long-term plans. And one of them is cultural care, social emotional learning. The other 2 is multiple literacy and relevant learning. But cultural care being social emotional learning, it was one of them. It was just right, that work started right before the pandemic, right? And I was part of the district committee creating this, how would that's gonna look like for our students, for our community, for our staff, and what we needed to do about that. And part of it, we focus on those 6 recommendations of, professional learning, engaging parents and families, diversifying the workforce, wraparound services, rigorous curriculum, inclusive practices, and we started like educating all our staff on restorative practices, and that way, which is a big part of social emotional learning. When our students do make mistakes or they handle things the way it shouldn't be, how do we handle that? Do we get like, shouldn't be doing that, you get suspended and go out there while they are going to a home that the reason why they came in and just came in late, and just when the teacher say, where's your work? And they didn't do the work, and say, why again, get out of my classroom. And the kid might have said a word that we are not really supposed to be saying in school, and they get suspended. They don't know the story, that child was like opted up all day long. The father was taken from the house and incarcerated. He couldn't sleep. He was trying to take care of the kid. This was happening and all of that. And the child was just trying to, and these stories that we live and I hear from our students. The child was just trying to show up to school after everything they have been through all night long. But after all the situations that are happening at home, they were just like putting on the book bag and just trying to show up. And that's how, as an educator, we do that. And educating our staff, but also having them get to know each child and what they're going through, to understand just the fact that the child showed up needs to be celebrated under those circumstances instead of that. And then if the kid gets suspended, what happens? It's a cycle. They're going to, instead of being in, at least in a safe environment in school and learning, that's just going to make things even worse. So these are some of the things that that we have seen through the, that we are more self-aware, and everything around us is making us feel that now more than ever, we need to be intentional about social emotional learning. And we need to keep in mind everything that is going around the world. Like there's so many, socioeconomics, race and religion and all the things that are happening, in addition to our children learning the skills to regulate themselves and to and to be in a place of that they feel safe and belong, and they can be open to learning. Because as we know, when there's so much trauma, our brain doesn't develop the same way, and our kids are not open to learning. So what can we do so we can create that environment so our kids can be open to learning and exactly what we want: joy, learning, and growth, right?
It reminds me a lot of Dr. Perry's work with, understanding how the brain works. And when we interviewed him, he was with an educator that said, as an educator, why don't I know this? And I remember standing in front of my class with behavioral students and thinking, what's wrong with these kids? They gave me a really bad bunch this year, like all blame, nothing, no responsibility on my part. And it's so different now that we understand how, like, my cortisol raises their cortisol, how it really matters what I think of them. And instead of thinking what's wrong with them, like what happened to them. And you must see that in your school a lot with your students coming from different places. And then this understanding, but does everybody have this understanding? How do people get the training? Do you bring people in, or how would you make sure that if you saw me back in the day and I was like, hey, these students are really bad, like blaming the kid, what would you say to me? Would you send me somewhere off to Bruce Perry's class?
I think everything starts with also learning. We need to educate provide learning to our educators and the staff, because if you don't know, you're doing like Madia, you're doing the best you can with what you have in the learning. So first of all, raising the capacity and educating our staff regarding trauma and how trauma in the life of what our students are living at home, how that affects learning and how that affects behavior, and how like your energy, right? And if you're not regulating yourself well, it's gonna impact your students around you. That's really important. So we have been, doing a lot of work on trauma, informing how the brain works, and that's one of the reasons I love your podcast, Neuroscience, and how the brain works and how that affects learning and everything else involving education. And also, with equity and inclusion, diversity, educating our staff about that and having our staff learn the stories of our students. One of our PD recently was talking about immigration, and we have 2 students that are currently in our district that were part of the students that were like thrown off the wall and with that. So we actually interview the mom and without showing the face, and share the stories. And you see the staff crying when we share what happened to those kids that are now there in our schools. So sharing those stories is important. And most important of all is also creating that environment for the staff. Being in a psychological safe place, because a lot of times we want to say, okay, Andrea, you need to create a psychological safe environment where your students are comfortable. You need to get to know them. If they're afraid or fearful or know their hopes and fears, but do I, as your leader, know that about you? Do I know what is worrying you? Do I know that your son is sick at home and that you're trying to run to take care of your mom? That I don't know all of that. So it starts also with us as leaders providing that psychological safe environment with our staff and getting to know them and creating those systems where we have that space. One of my favorite things, and sometimes we couldn't do it a lot because of the pandemic, was like a breakfast. What's on your mind, what's on your heart? And we invited like our staff to come in, and we had donuts and goodies and just celebrate it. Some of them, oh, my daughter's getting married. Well, yes, it's going on. Or like, I'm worried about how we're going to be able to have, lunch, everybody in there, or this is happening. Those are like the space for the staff to share that, or doing community circles when there's conflict about what we're going to do. And also having our staff, like one of the things I love the most about my work is, in addition to going and being able to give feedback on instruction as an instructional leader, is checking in with them. I like to have like check-ins, how things are going, what's on your mind, what's on your heart, what are your fears, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and things like that. That way I can get to know them and where they are and see how I can be supportive. And I like to know everybody's kids and things that make everybody smile. And I might be walking down the hallway and see Andrea with her head down, and then I say, Andrea, how's so and so? Your little kid, and all of a sudden you bright up, because you just, for a minute, you are actually connecting to something that matters. Or like, is your dad okay? I heard, is everything okay? How things are going? How can I support you? Creating that for the staff, so that way they see the importance of how they feel when their leader does that with them. Mm-hmm. Why is it important for them to do that with the kid? Modeling those behaviors, not just about telling people what to do, but model it. You want to welcome an environment, model that for your children. I call my my teachers my kids, and that's critical, and that's so important. And sometimes what we see, we need to do a lot of work in that area.
So much of what you said resonated and brought back memories of things you said in your presentation there, because you talk about the safety of your students and you don't know their fears. And I remember when I came to the US, I came on an H-1B1 visa right before September 11th happened. And the work that I came to do in the seminar industry wasn't possible. And so everything halted, and my fear was like, oh, I'm going to have to go back, or I'm going to be kicked back. But there's always that fear of being kicked back. If I speed on the highway, am I going to get found out and back? And people don't know that unless they've experienced it themselves. Like, because I see people driving 95, all these people that, don't have these fears. And I remember when I got my citizenship, I said to the guy next to me, what made you go forward and become a US citizen? And he was a lawyer. And he said, I was just so afraid of being afraid. And I was like, a lawyer sitting next to me. And so thinking about all the students in class, you don't know what stories they have in their head about, someone's going to kick you back because you don't belong here. When you talk about school safety, it goes deeper for someone who knows how that feels to not belong.
Yeah. In our school, we have a really high population of Hispanics and immigrants. And that's especially, big fear. We have had students thinking that, like, they worrying in school because they don't know if the parents are somebody's going to knock on the door and the parents are going to be home. And they have shared that. And a lot of times they don't apply or come to school thinking that if the parents think if they come to school for an appointment or to complete something, they're going to get in trouble and we're going to report it to immigration. All those things that for an American person, somebody who lives here, they have like no clue. Like, what it is for like a 12 or 13-year-old kid or a little kid thinking like, is my mom going to be home? If they're going to send us back? If they send us back, are they sending her back and I stay here and I will have to stay with her? Like, all those fears is like just anxious for us as adults, right?
Can't even imagine as a child, because
it's insane. And it's a daily struggle that a lot of our students have every single day.
Mm-hmm. Which is why it just brings me to my next question. We've all heard, as an educator, of Rita Pierson and her TED Talk, every child deserves a champion, an adult that will never give up on them, who understands the power of the connection and insists they become the best they possibly can be. And, when I saw your story, I thought, thank goodness that person helped you and was a champion for you. And that really is why I do the podcast. It's to share strategies so each of us can be the best we can be, no matter where we've come from. You know, every kid needs a champion. So did your district always have this vision of SEL through an equity lens, or do you think that your influence and your story moved it forward light years?
I mean, we, like as I shared before, the building relationship was there, but I feel like as our population have changed and in leaderships, everybody has been adding to it, and we have become more intentional about learning about equity, learning about social and investing about it. Because also as a district, let's say when you say culture of care is going to be a focus, you need to, how do you show you care? Put in the time, the money, the energy in that. Don't say you care about social emotional learning if you're not, providing those learning experiences for the school and educating the staff. So that has been, happening, and also having more platforms to share some stories. Like one of my girls, I call her name is Anna He, which is like I feel like I was her champion when I was at the middle school principal. Now she's at the high school, but I still connect with her. When she came into the country, we will always have a welcoming, time. Though the guidance counselor and the AP meet with them, and when my guidance counselor at that time didn't speak English, so I was, doing the translation for her. But we spent like an hour, like she's saying to her, like, we have gym at this period, and I'm like, tienes, educación física en este periodo, para adelante y para atrás. Before we started the conversation, when I was taking her in, I'm like, you're gonna be okay. Everything is gonna be okay. In Spanish, I was just like you. I came to this country as a middle school, and I know sometimes it's scary, but I'm here. It's gonna be okay, and you're in good hands, okay? And she's like, okay. So when after all of that conversation about classes and periods and what she had to do in the buses and all of that, and I'm back and forth speaking to her, the guidance counselor said, do you have any questions? And I said, ¿tienes alguna pregunta, Nahi? And she's like, Señora Mercado, ¿cómo aprendió inglés? ¿Cómo aprendió inglés? ¿Cómo aprendió inglés? All she was caring about, like her whole fear is like, how do you learn English, basically? And I just smiled and I said, little by little, everything is okay. And I show her where my office is. You can every day come in here. They will pay her up, like I said, with a buddy person to guide her through that. And I said, doesn't matter what time it is, you can come here. This secretary also speaks Spanish, and I introduced her to a lot of people that she can connect with at every floor. And she came every day. I met her mom. Her mom is a single mom, and she, we had a meeting, and she was struggling learning English, and we connected her to get learning, English classes. And even up to this day, I'm proud to say, like, she's, I think, a junior now in high school, and we're running the summer program, and we have in the summer program a newcomer class for each grade, which is like a kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, 6 classes of newcomers, kids who have been here just for a few months. And she's volunteering to help with those classes. And she actually this morning emailed me, what time do I need to be there? Because I want her to be part of the orientation for teachers. And like, she's right now, her story and her language is an asset to those newcomers that are coming in. And that's how we're trying to create leaders and show them, listen, I was able to support you. Now you're able to support all these young kids who are coming in and are probably as afraid as we were before. And you can teach them, and you can learn, they can learn from you. So it's such a beautiful thing to be able to be part of that and seeing that. And she's, she got a job last year in the summer for a couple of weeks, and I had to write her letter of recommendation. She's like, I need a letter of recommendation, Ms. Mercado. So it's just like a connection, like somebody that it really is so meaningful and amazing to have a feeling that you can make a difference in somebody's life. And my goal is like to pass it on, and pass it on.
Mm-hmm. Which is so incredible that you're sharing this on the podcast, because there's many people around the world that listen to this and can gain ideas. And So this is your story and who you're helping. And then maybe someone takes some ideas and then it spreads and it snowballs, it's the exciting part of this. So we're kind of getting to the top of the hour and you've got a lot of recommendations. Can we maybe take one recommendation and just talk about how you would cover one of the six? And then I can put a link in the show notes for people that want to hear, like, go deep dive into all of them, just because I know that it's already recorded out there. But what recommendation would be the top one that you hear educators want to talk about, and how would you begin that one in your school?
The six of them are really, really important, but one of the ones that I feel is that the importance of educating our, like, the professional learning for our staff. Our staff need to have the capacity to be able to understand that, and for the district to be able to provide that, to understand why we need to create this environment for our kids, why deep connections matter, why equity and diversity and inclusion is important, and create those spaces for us to have those conversations and learning experiences, so that way we can actually know where people are, and being able to move forward. All of them are important. From the professional learning, engaging parents and families is also important, because when we support the families, we're supporting the child. Like, if I had somebody that was actually helping my mom translate, or like some of the things that we have is, like, we have Open Door, which is a medical facility in the middle school and the high school. So kids can get their physical and everything while they're in school, and parents don't have to pull them out and take them. Or Neighbors Link, which is one of our partners who helps with like paperwork, legal work, translation, and they provide like English classes to parents while at the same time babysitting for the kids, while at the same time tutoring our students. That's also is going to support the child, because the child is not going to have all the responsibilities, let's say, for example, that I needed to have, and making sure that we remove all those obstacles. Why our English language learners or our students of color have to not be part of rigorous coursework? Why can everybody be, and we can actually give them the supports that they need? If it wasn't for that Miss W, because her name was Miss Winterbaum, I remember her. If it wasn't for her, I would just have taken a RCT and not a Regents diploma, and have, nobody else will have discovered. That's what was expected. So we need to make sure we know our students, and I feel like also inclusive disciplines, like learning about restorative practices and community circles, because I feel that we need to. Why do we teach our kids how to do math, right? And if they make a mistake, no, this is what you do. Why do we teach our kids about history and social studies? We need to teach our children about behavior, about how to manage themselves, about what strategies to use, and that's all social emotional learning. What to do when they're upset, how to ask for help, how to take a deep breath. If I heard this somewhere, I can't remember, I'm trying to quote somebody, but if we teach our 3 and 4, 5-year-olds how to regulate themselves, we will not be having so many, situations in middle school and high school, and HR for us, right? For adults. Right. Because we will be able to handle those situations and making responsible decisions and deal with conflicts and having courageous conversations and difficult conversations that some adults are difficult having. But if we do that, like as they are young, our world will be a different one, right? And another thing is like the wraparound services. We have a lot of resources out there, but how do we have all those resources come to our families? How can we make it accessible for them? And it all starts with getting, knowing what our family and our students need, right? And it comes from the educator that is right in front of that child. So all of them are really important. But even if you can I tell anybody, if you can just get to know one child and the family and see what you can do for that person, like that person said, Ellie seems to can handle Regan's work. She can do this. And 5 for that person. I still today remember that. And today I'm able to, share my knowledge and my practice and try to be that person to other students in my school and try to share, like in this podcast or workshops that I had in the past and in the future, and my teachers in schools and everyone, what a difference we can make. Deep connections matter. And even if it's one child that you can do that, or one adult, because changing, helping an adult, you're helping, our students. When the adults are able to be in a good place and they feel safe, they're going to bring out the best. And that way we can have our staff and our students have the best possible learning environment to grow and reach their fullest potential.
So all these resources that you shared with me when we were talking back and forth, the links to Ossining, is that just for Ossining, or could other people access what you've done? I'm just curious.
No, absolutely. The one that I have shared with you with the presentation, anybody, because I actually put that presentation for that workshop, and that workshop was people from all over New York State. So the actual documents are my documents, so I can share with everyone. Some things that are like related to Ossining, you need to have the Ossining email, which for this school. But I'm more than happy to share any of the resources that are there, and you're more than happy to link it if that's being helpful, and also the recording. And anyone that has specific information, they can email me at emercado@ossininufsd.org, or follow me in Twitter. I think I am emercadoap at emercadoap, and I will be more than happy to provide all these things, because it takes time and energy to create a lot of this, resources and ideas and activities to build community that we have done for the staff, or structures to follow to when we have in restorative, circles with the staff. But I don't mind like showing it to somebody and say, hey, listen, this is what we did. Right. Use what you can. Change it and make it work for your school and your district, because every school and district is a little different. But if we all do that and we all share what we have, I want people to share with me. I'm just learning and growing, and this is something I'm passionate about. And if you share with me some ideas and I share with you some ideas, I know we can together we can actually make sure that our kids have the best possible learning environment they can have.
Love it. I'll make sure I link everything in the bottom of the show notes. And you had some phenomenal feedback. Dr. James Ryan said, social emotional learning and equity, two of the most important issues facing educators today. And he was so thankful for the work that you're doing. And there were many stories like this of people. So I'm just so grateful that you had this chance to share with us. Are you doing any workshops? You mentioned to me beforehand there's something coming up. Is that just for Ossining, or are there things that are for everybody that we're interested in?
No, it's actually a regional leadership institute on July 11th. And it's just I'm going to be, the whole day is going to be related to social emotional learning, cultural care, but every workshop is different. The one that I'm leading that day is about building the community for the staff, because a lot of times we think about like our self-care, which is eating right, exercising, sleep, because that way we can be ourselves. And then social emotional learning, how to teach our kids all the strategies of problem solving and teamwork, relationship skills, self-awareness. But then the other part of creating in your learning environment, in your school, creating that healthy place and safe place for the staff, so the staff can thrive. My workshop is going to be focused a little bit more of that, but the rest of them, because it's a whole day of cultural care, they're going to be focusing on different and other parts. So I'm more than happy to, and you can put it in the link. Anyone that wants to join, is not just for us, and it's for all the leaders and educators out there.
Well, that's phenomenal. Is there anything, Ellie, that's important that I've missed? I know that you've covered a lot here. And when I watched your presentation and saw how you dove deep into your 6 recommendations, is there anything that I've left out that you think is important for us to leave with?
I think we did, cover a lot, but I do feel that together, if we do this work together, we can make sure students are not just surviving all the trauma that they are going through, but they can thrive and get stronger. And also sharing our stories is powerful. That way we can see other people's perspective and help others understand where our kids come from. When we do that, we are able to make better choices and be more open to this work. So I feel that if we all do a little bit, even I know sometimes it's overwhelming and it is a lot of work, but just one little thing that you can do today, whether that be getting to know another student, so saying good morning and welcoming someone else. I have a little wellness area by my office with lavender and gratitude cards and some food, so that way when teachers come in, I'm like, come in here, you need a break, just how are you? Those little things can make a difference in the life of one person, and that person, like someone did it for me, I hope I can share with many others, and we can make a difference.
Well, Ellie, I want to thank you so much for reaching out to me and sharing your story with all of us. What you've built with SEL, with the lens of equity, is something I've never seen before. And I hope that people can take a look at it and take away some pieces to use, because you've really spent a lot of time with your district, and there's such strength and power that comes from you. And I know that's not what you felt all those years ago when you were standing in that English class and just couldn't find those words to read the poem. So I just am grateful that you found your way and that you're doing this modeling for all the others. I want to thank you seriously from the bottom of my heart for the vulnerability that you've shown to share your story. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for listening to me, and for your time. I appreciate everyone, and let's do this. We can do this.
You got it. Thanks so much, Ellie. My final thoughts. This episode hit me pretty hard on the emotional level that was obvious throughout, especially at the end. I had to step away from my desk to think about why. I know how important this work is, but there was something about Ellie's story that moved me deeply. After thinking about it for a while, I made the connection. We all know why we do what we do, and that's an important part of our self-awareness to keep us moving forward when times are difficult. Why I do what I do with this podcast is to lift up those students like Ellie, who needed encouragement to access her unlimited potential that we can see she has. Her story of reading that poem in class made me remember when I first saw the importance of these SEL skills before they were called this, and it was in the late 90s when I was working in the seminar industry, and I watched the speaker working with this group of 12 teens. If you've heard the story, you'll know why Ellie's background hit me on the emotional level. The moment I knew that SEL was going to be an important part of my future was when I saw these kids showcasing the skills they'd been learning. Things like how to improve their attitude and their mindset and how to set goals. And there was this one boy, Brian, who struggled to speak when it was his turn. And you couldn't blame him. He was on the stage at the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans in front of thousands of people, and the speaker went behind him and rubbed his back to calm him down so that he could get his words out. This moment is etched in stone for me as a pivotal moment in time. Imagine if Ellie had a teacher who helped and encouraged her when she was struggling with that poem. It only takes one person to skyrocket or champion a student, and I'm so glad that Ellie found her champion. That's why I spend the time to record these podcasts, hoping that maybe just one idea will help one student like Ellie to take her talents into the world with the strength and courage that she used to truly make an impact. If I was to ever end this podcast, and I don't plan on it, I'm just too curious to keep learning and sharing new ideas, but if I did, I would end it with this episode, as it does come full circle for me with why social and emotional skills are so important in our schools and workplaces today. Do you know your why, or why you do what you do? While I know my why is just as clear as the day we launched this podcast, I know there's still so much more to explore and learn in the field of neuroscience, just like we saw with Dr. Jalal's episode on dreams. As new discoveries with the brain and learning are uncovered, I'd love to share them here so we can all access and use them in our life, and I'll stick to what I've always said. As long as listeners find these topics interesting, I'll continue to produce more episodes. And with that, I'll close out this episode, and we'll see you on Friday for this week's Brain Fact Friday, where we'll take a closer look at Dr. Jalal's work on the dreaming brain, which expanded my awareness beyond where it's ever been. I hope you've enjoyed this episode with Ellie Mercado. You can find all the links to follow her and her work and access her resources in the show notes. I'll see you on Friday.